through today about Te Anau. So Fiordland would be covered by helicopters from Queenstown, but only if the three companies that provide services in the South Island now band together to bid for a joint contract. We want to get expert comment on this very shortly from Nat Every. And I don't expect you know the ins and outs of helicopter rescue services financing, but does this sound like a good idea? Just your quick impressions of what they're planning.
I'm a bit confused by this, really. I don't know. I can say I don't know, Jim.
Right.
I need to know more detail, and I'm not up on this one enough.
No longer, for example, could a rescue chopper nip into a place like Milford Sound to bring out an injured tourist from Te Anau. It would have to come from Queenstown probably, and the further away the chopper is, the longer it takes.
Well, my stepfather worked, after the police, he worked for coordinating SC rescues for civil aviation, and time is of the essence. And, you know, you need to be able to be as close as you can and familiar with the area, more importantly, I'd say.
Nat Every is a Taupo Rescue helicopter pilot, and he's kindly joining us on this. Nat, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So if there wasn't one where you are, I read today that a helicopter out of Hamilton would take 45 minutes to get to the Tongariro crossing. Is 45 minutes too long when you're rescuing someone with maybe severe injuries, Nat?
Well, I think any time delay when you're rescuing someone with severe injuries is, of course, going to have an impact on their well-being and their possibility of survival or their chance of recovery. But I guess the more of an issue is the fact that this is a significant increase in time over and above what the current system offers, and that's our concerns here in Taupo, is that the proposed system for the residents of the Central Plateau region and Taupo, the proposed system will actually increase the time delay over and above what is currently afforded them on the current system.
Should communities have a big say in this? Because people raise a lot of money for helicopter rescue, Nat, don't they?
Well, look, they have. And traditionally, the community has provided the funding for these rescue helicopter services. They've supported these services for a number of years, and we have been the community asset, and it's been a wonderful system to date. Now, I guess the issue that that arises here, you know, with the removal of the Taupo and the Rotorua helicopters, that's 420 missions that now need to be done by helicopters around the periphery that are the remaining helicopters under this new proposed scheme. And that's where the regional communities, the other communities around us, the community of Hawke's Bay, the community of Wanganui Manawatu, the community of Taranaki, the community of Waikato, I really think they need to sit up and take notice here, because those 420 missions that we did last year between Taupo and Rotorua are not going to go away. So now these other communities, their helicopters will have to service our community. So consequently, you know, they'll be affected themselves, because that resource of the helicopter will be in our region doing our jobs, I guess you'd say, and not servicing their community.
Just really quickly, will lives be lost in places like Te Anau, Rotorua, Taupo if the choppers can no longer operate from those places? Do you think?
Look, with the time delay, I think it's inevitable that there will be an increase in the incidence of serious injury and lives will be lost.
All right, thank you for neatly summing that up. Nat Every talking to us on the panel. Kevin Milne and Catherine Robertson have been our guests today. It's been lovely having you both on.
Thank you very much, Jim.
And we are back tomorrow, as always. Thanks for your company, everybody, and Checkpoint is next.
Tō te mairai, hoa mahi kōrero, kei te haere hei kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, shock in Invercargill after the council announces the Southland Museum and Art Gallery building will close by the end of the week. Mayor Tim Shadbolt joins us. A controversial data modelling program that was used to profile overstays has been put on hold. This just announced. The Privacy Commissioner urges Facebook users, close your accounts. 63,724 people are confirmed as having their privacy breached, and if you don't want it breached, don't be on Facebook. Fiji prepares for its second cyclone in less than a week. We'll go live to the Gold Coast as shot putter Tom Walsh and weightlifter Laurel Hubbard chase gold. And the Auckland teacher who spends 15 hours in her car every week because she can't afford to live in the city.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Immigration Minister has put on hold a controversial data modelling program that was used to profile overstayers. Last week, RNZ News revealed the existence of the program, which has been running for the last 18 months. It was being used to target people who could be a cost to the health or the justice system and who should be deported quickly. Critics say it was racial profiling, but the Minister Ian Lees-Galloway says his officials insist that neither race nor nationality were used. He says the department will work with both the Human Rights Commission and the Privacy Commissioner to check that information is being used in the right way.
Until they have done that and that they are satisfied that there are no human rights breaches or privacy breaches in this work, I've asked them to temporarily suspend use of the spreadsheet tool that they have been using.
The Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway. State media in Syria is reporting a military airfield outside the city of Homs has come under attack from airstrikes and is blaming the US. The Pentagon says the US is not involved. The reports come after the American President Donald Trump said Syria would pay the price for a suspected chemical attack on a rebel-held area outside Damascus yesterday. The BBC's Andy Moore reports.
Syrian state media said the T4 airbase near Homs had come under sustained attack. It said 12 people had been killed and 30 injured. There was a claim that 8 missiles had been shot down. The Pentagon issued a statement saying the Department of Defense was not conducting airstrikes in Syria at this time. One pro-regime website in Syria claimed the attack had been carried out by the Israelis. Israel did launch a strike against this particular airbase in February, saying an Iranian drone had been launched from there. So far, there's been no comment from the Israeli military.
Andy Moore reporting. The Southland Museum and Art Gallery will close its doors indefinitely after it was found likely to be earthquake-prone and a risk to staff. The Invercargill City Council employs 41 staff at the site. The Museum Trust Board's chairperson, Tony Biddle, says the news that buildings may be unsafe is a sad day for the city, as the museum is one of the biggest tourist attractions.
I can imagine there will be a lot of people that are angry. It's devastating for the board, and it's not easy at all. No, I'm committed, and I know the board is committed at working through this, and I'm adamant that together we can come through and hopefully look at a potential solution in the future.
Tony Biddle says the museum's collection, as well as its resident tuatara, will remain in the building while the museum's future is discussed. The Waikato District Health Board has pulled the plug on its ill-fated multi-million-dollar online doctor service, Smart Health. The online and mobile app enabled people to talk to a doctor on their smartphone, but only 10,000 people signed up, considerably fewer than expected. Andrew McRae reports.
Smart Health was seen as a top priority by former Waikato DHB Chief Executive Nigel Murray, who resigned in October after inappropriate spending. The 2-year trial's estimated to have cost a minimum of $16 million, but a review underway will determine the exact amount. The DHB's Chief of Staff, Neville Haplis, says renewing the contract at a cost of just over $7 million wasn't justified under the board's current financial situation. He says the DHB procured a piece of technology without a clear idea of how to use or implement it properly. In Hamilton, ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
The Privacy Commissioner says the only way for Facebook users to be certain their data is not being misused is to delete their existing accounts. Facebook today revealed that nearly 65,000 New Zealanders have been caught up in a data breach affecting 87 million people worldwide. John Edwards says although Facebook is taking action to make sure a breach doesn't happen again, for anyone concerned about its ability to keep data safe, deleting their account is an option.
Well, I don't want my last 10 years' worth of likes and pokes and posts to be misused. The only surefire way of doing it, I think, is to delete the account.
Mr. Edwards says if users still want to use the platform to connect with friends and family, they could create a new account with better security settings. It's 5:04. Sport. New Zealand should more than double its gold medal haul at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games tonight. with 6 strong medal contenders competing. Weightlifter Laurel Hubbard is currently contesting the 90 kilogram plus division. Para-swimmer Sophie Pascoe is on course for her second gold of the Games after setting a personal best and qualifying fastest for the 100 metre breaststroke final. And para-javelin thrower Holly Robinson is also likely to go close in her event. On the squash court, Joelle King and Paul Cole will contest their finals. World champion shot putter Tom Walsh is a favourite to win gold after setting a Games record in qualifying. His final is set to start after 10 o'clock tonight. Walsh, who won silver in Glasgow 4 years ago, says he's now accustomed to the pressure.
I know the one thing I need to do is I need to be relaxed. I can't try, and as soon as I start trying, it's no good. So as if I can let the river flow and don't push the river, mate, I'll be fine.
Shot putter Tom Walsh. The American golfer Patrick Reed seized the opportunity to win his first major championship at the Masters today. Reed held off Ricky Fowler and 2015 champion Jordan Spieth and says today was simply his day.
You know, to be able to make that putt, I felt like on 14, and then to make the 2-putt on 17, it just kind of, gave me that momentum going to 18, which in the past has given me so many issues. And to be able to have to par the last hole to win my first major, it definitely felt right.
Patrick Reed, that's the news.
A traffic warden beaten up.
This is an idiotic act of buggery because he turned to walk away and was sucker punched, so it's despicable behaviour, really.
The Silver Ferns beaten by Malawi.
I think that the Ferns should never have gotten themselves in that position of playing catch-up netball, and I probably think that they took them too lightly.
And a security breach at Wellington Zoo.
They were going in amongst a group of 12 monkeys who would have all been defending their turf.
No monkey business. Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then, after 9, news as it happens. In-depth conversations with world-leading experts and the latest trends you need to know about. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and a significant winter storm will bring heavy snow and damaging winds to some areas. Please check the latest watches and warnings. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, isolated showers frequent tomorrow, some heavy with thunderstorms and damaging wind gusts. For the remainder of the North Island, a few showers turning to rain with heavy falls in the south tonight, spreading north tomorrow with possible thunderstorms and damaging wind gusts. Snow lowering to 700 metres tomorrow evening. For Bulla, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers turning to rain this evening with heavy falls and snow lowering to 400 metres overnight tonight, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon, then clearing Nelson and Bulla later. Strong gusty southeasterlies. Westland to Fiordland, showers, snow lowering to 600 metres overnight tonight, clearing tomorrow. Strong gusty southeasterlies. Southland and Otago, showers heavy at times with snow lowering to 500 metres from tonight, but 300 metres for a time tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, rain with heavy falls developing tomorrow morning. It's exactly 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Lovely to have you back. Coming up later in the program, immigration. In fact, that is next. Later, the financial squeeze on teachers and on vote education. But we begin tonight in Southland, where the region's largest cultural and heritage institution is shutting its doors very suddenly. The distinctive pyramid-shaped Southland Museum and Art Gallery in Invercargill will close to the public on Thursday. This was announced this afternoon. The trust board that supervises the buildings is responding to seismic risk. This is big news for the 200,000 plus visitors per annum who visit the museum in a city of less than 60,000 people, and for the 41 staff at the site. The Southland Museum cares for over 100 tuatara as well, from newborn babies to the world-famous Henry, who is over 110 years old. We will have more on the native reptiles later in the program. But I spoke to Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt just before we came on air about the sudden closure.
Of course, it's sad for us as a city to lose your museum suddenly, but I've got a young family now, and it's a very popular place for children, and it's just not worth the risk, as sad as it may be.
And the risk is a simple seismic one. It is 30% or thereabouts of the new building standard, isn't it?
That's right, and it's a very complex building because it's actually 3 buildings. And what we learned from Christchurch is that you can have a perfectly good building even, but if your next door neighbours dodgy. It crashes over. Not many buildings are designed for a sideways blow, and if that issue comes up with us that it could, the three different old buildings that the pyramid was built around could work against each other and undermine the integrity of the whole place.
41 staff in there currently. What will happen to them and their jobs?
Well, that's, of course, our CEs. In local government, we only hire one person, and that's the CE or CEO, whichever you prefer, and they hire the rest of the staff. So she's been working through this with HR and getting the best solution we possibly can out of it.
This is important to your city, though, isn't it? Having a museum and an art gallery, having a facility like this. You can't not have one, can you? No, we've just got to. And it's sort of, well, you know, politics, it's all about timing. We had all the plans were being drawn up for a new complex, and then, of course, the snow fell on our stadium, our first stadium, and came crashing to the ground. We're just lucky no one was in there. And then we hardly recovered from that. And then we had the Christchurch earthquakes. So the museum upgrade sort of got put on the back burner because of those two horrific disasters. So what is going to happen now? How long will it be, do you think, until this facility is made strong enough to get staff back in and visitors back in, or will you look potentially at starting from scratch?
I think in the short term, we're likely, and it happened during the elections, we had a pop-up art gallery because we've had the water towers being closed because of the new legislation, the Anderson House art galleries been closed because of legislation. So we trialled a pop-up art gallery. And it was very well received. So I'm sure we can be innovative enough to come to something that may be, you know, quite exciting. Sometimes a disaster can lead to new ideas and new thinking and new ways of designing and developing art galleries.
Absolutely. But at the moment, what are you looking at? Are you looking at strengthening, setting aside a temporary replacement for a permanent response? Are you looking at strengthening this facility or completely starting from scratch?
Well, it's sort of not our decision. It sounds ironic. It's not our decision to make. The museum is actually owned by a separate trust, which consists of all the councils of Southland. So it's not as though we can just make a decision on our own. So there'll be intense negotiations going on.
Tim Shadbolt, the Mayor of Invercargill, but as you heard, it is not just Invercargill's baby, this building or these buildings. As for the Tuatara, we'll hear later in the program about what is going to happen to them. 5:13. Immigration New Zealand has apologised for confusion relating to a controversial data modelling program used to profile overstays, which has just been suspended by the Minister. The pilot program has been running for 18 months. It's been described as racial profiling. Both the Privacy and Human Rights Commissioners have asked officials for more information. The Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, wasn't aware of the program when RNZ broke the story last week, calling for an urgent briefing from staff. That was given today, and this afternoon he held a media conference.
I am reasonably comfortable with the information that I've been given. However, I am aware that there are some concerns around perception and that people want to be certain that the information Immigration New Zealand has is being used appropriately and that there is no inappropriate form of profiling being undertaken. So I've asked Immigration New Zealand to engage with the Privacy Commissioner and the Human Rights Commission. They are doing that. They're speaking with the Human Rights Commissioner tomorrow and the Privacy Commission next week. And until they have done that and that they are satisfied that there are no human rights breaches or privacy breaches in this work, I've asked them to temporarily suspend use of the spreadsheet tool that they have been using to prioritise those people that they take enforcement action against.
Ian Lees-Galloway says he's been assured that race and country of origin aren't criteria used to prioritise deportations. He was asked whether he was concerned about what this has done for his government's image.
What I was concerned about is that there were misconceptions about exactly what this is. Some people were talking about a sophisticated algorithm, some people were talking about racial profiling. Both of those are incorrect, and I think it's very important that the public know exactly what this is and what it isn't.
Ian Lees-Galloway. In its briefing, Immigration New Zealand admits there was a reference to a harm model. However, it said it was only an Excel spreadsheet. The pilot, the briefing says, was limited to Auckland and used existing data and estimated costs to identify overstayers, quote, likely to commit harm. Immigration New Zealand apologised for confusion, saying the use of the term profiling led to misunderstanding and that there was no specific software. The briefing says the term profiling means different things to different people. It said the information was gathered through the immigration system, which Mr. Ian Lees-Galloway says he wants to now check is indeed appropriate. The Privacy Commissioner says the only way for Facebook users to be certain their data is not being misused is to delete their existing accounts. John Edwards says if users still want to take advantage of the social media platform, they should then sign up again with more robust privacy settings. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
Thousands of New Zealanders have been swept up in the Facebook data breach, which has affected 87 million people worldwide. 10 people who downloaded a personality quiz have inadvertently opened the floodgates in this country by allowing the British firm Cambridge Analytica to access data on their friends. The Privacy Commissioner, John Edwards, says the extent of the breach in New Zealand has surprised him.
What I think was most striking about those figures is that from just 10 New Zealand Facebook account holders who downloaded the quiz, the malicious quiz, some 64,000 people have been affected, possibly compromised.
Mr. Edwards says Facebook is yet to reveal what information the Kogan app was able to access and what it was used for. The Privacy Commission also wants to know whether New Zealanders impacted by the breach will be told and whether they'll be advised on what steps they can take to protect themselves and their data. Mr. Edwards says although Facebook is working to make sure similar data misuse doesn't happen again, individual users may want to consider what action to take with their accounts.
If you want to actually say, well, I don't want my last 10 years worth of likes and pokes and posts to be misused in the way that's happened here, the only surefire way of doing it, I think, is to delete the account. And if you want to still use the platform, go back and then use it on your own well-informed terms.
Mr. Edwards says the Commission will not launch its own investigation of Facebook, but instead monitor those underway in the UK, Canada, the United States and Australia. The majority of Facebook users spoken to by RNZ today didn't seem fazed by the data breach.
It would be hard to get off it if everyone did, yes.
It's kind of concerning that Facebook seems to have taken over the world somewhat.
I don't think I would get off it in the sense that everybody uses it.
A lot of people on Facebook have public profiles. They need to go into the settings, make sure that it is private.
Will you be staying on?
Definitely.
It would probably make me think about it, but probably not.
But that's the exact reason why I don't belong to Facebook or won't join social media.
The Chief Executive of NetSafe, Martin Cocker, says the breach is a reminder to Facebook users to take privacy settings more seriously, but not necessarily to quit the platform altogether.
Facebook has responded to this breach by setting up a series of tools and improving their management of apps. And if anything, the breach has led to a safer Facebook in the future. So, I think people should review the actions that Facebook's taken, and they should make the decision on whether they want to stick with the platform based on that. But at this stage, I wouldn't be recommending that people exit the platform simply because of this incident.
Mr. Cocker says Facebook's mistake is that it trusted one of the app's providers and that the app was allowed to be so intrusive in the first place.
I think the lesson for Facebook and for anybody in this space is, you have to have more than rules to make sure that people don't abuse these opportunities. It's important to recognise that Facebook didn't bleed this data out. It wasn't Facebook, the company, that was the bad actor here, but their controls weren't robust enough to stop it, and that's why Facebook is in the gun.
In a statement, Facebook says it has made several changes to better protect people's information and to restrict data access on the platform. It says it will begin showing users at the top of their newsfeed any apps connected to Cambridge Analytica and an easy way to delete them from tomorrow. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
The country's largest teachers' union, the NZEI, says teachers are fleeing the profession and would-be teachers are choosing other professions instead as the cost of living in our major cities makes the job increasingly unattractive. This will come to a head next month, of course, with teachers going into formal wage negotiations. The figure being sought currently is standing at 16% over 2 years. As with nurses, the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, has signalled a determination to find the money for a meaningful increase. But with DHBs in debt, the health system in desperate need of major capital expenditure and real pressure on wages in the public sector, the budget will not be able to match demand with supply. We've been looking at vote health at length, of course, and we have more to come. But education is a major pressure point for the government. Stories like that of Kavita Sriwastaw, who can't afford to live in Auckland, so spends 15 hours a week in her car and $200 a week on gas getting to and from her teaching job.
I live in Thames.
And you work in?
I work in Clendon, in Manurewa.
And so how long do you spend each day in the car?
In driving terms, it takes me about an hour and a half, so 3 hours a day.
An hour and a half each way each day?
Yes.
And what distance are you travelling each day?
I'm probably approximately more than 100, I think about 180 k's a day.
180 k's a day to get to and from work. And why do you do that, Kavita?
Because I love where I'm teaching and I love the children that I teach. And I'm a very passionate teacher.
I can hear them.
I'm all about making a difference.
I can hear them in the background. How old are they?
They're year 3s and 4s.
Yeah, it's a lovely age.
Yes.
Yeah, and they really bond with their teacher right at that age. So I can understand the appeal of the job. Why don't you live locally? Why don't you live nearer the school?
Because there aren't actually jobs out my ways, unfortunately, because a lot of people are moving out of Auckland and they're moving into smaller places like Thames, Coromandel, as well as other areas of New Zealand where it's cheaper living.
So there aren't any jobs near you. Why don't you move to where the job is? Why don't you live nearer the school in South Auckland?
Oh, it's way too expensive to live in Auckland. And I'm a single mum with 2 kids, 2 beautiful boys, and unfortunately it's just way too expensive.
So on a teacher's salary, you can't afford to live in South Auckland?
Yes. Yes, because a 1-bedroom house will cost at least 300 or more, 350 or more. And then you've got to put your, power and all that on top of that.
And are you managing to save any money?
No. No, not really.
And do you have a student loan still?
Yes, I do.
So when do you think you will be financially able to start thinking about one day buying a home?
Pretty much when the teacher's pay goes up, if it goes up, and if the government is able to provide some sort of packages for teachers would be really good, even if they look at something like that. I mean, because education is in crisis at the moment. If nothing's done about it, these kids, they're not going to have much of an education. They're going to have social problems. They will end up. Some of them may even end up in streets. So we can't have that happen. So it needs to be addressed now.
Kavita Sriwastaw. How bad is the problem? Well, go to the Education Gazette and you'll find 311 vacancies for primary school teachers, 224 for secondary school teachers, 470 vacancies being advertised for, quote, beginning teachers, and they are getting scarce. In February, Education Minister Chris Hipkins released figures showing a 40% drop in teacher enrolments since 2010. We'll look at the government's possible response to that between now and the budget. But we want to hear from teachers themselves. And so, well, here they are, 3 of them anyway. A new teacher, a senior teacher and a principal. Our cameraman Nick Monroe and I went to Birdwood Primary School in the West Auckland suburb of Ranui.
When I read the words once upon a time, I know that it's going to be what kind of story?
Fiction.
Great word. fiction. It's going to be a made-up story, isn't it?
Sharon Mansfield wanted to be the best teacher she could be. She went back to university. She now has a master's degree in education. She's still paying off her student loan. 12 years teaching experience, and in terms of her salary, she's climbed about as high as she can go.
So I'm now at the top of the pay scale, and I think I'm just over 70,000.
A master's in education, teaching for 12 years, and you're just over 70 grand.
Yeah. And Takahei and Tui, like I said, you're carrying on today with what you were doing yesterday.
That's higher than many of her classroom colleagues, much higher than some. Starting salary with a teaching qualification and a bachelor's degree is roughly 20 grand less. And when we talk to her during break time, Sharon pauses before she answers my question. Would you become a teacher again if you were starting over?
Ooh. I would. But, you know, the question itself makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Because it's not all roses, that's for sure. It's a really hard job. And the rewards are very intrinsic.
Gorilla, go, gorilla.
Intrinsic matters. It even sometimes sings, but it doesn't pay the bills. James is just past being a beginner. He's now in his 4th year as a teacher. A degree and a graduate diploma. He earns $51K. He's a dad, and his rent is roughly half his after-tax income. And so do you own a home?
No.
Do you think you'll ever own a home?
At this stage, it's not looking likely.
But then he tells me a story about school swimming and a child who wouldn't get in the pool, terrified of water. And they worked at it, encouraging him down the ladder, step by step.
And then we managed to get him all the way down to the bottom and to touch his feet on the ground. And he was just beamed after that. Like, he came out of the pool, he telling everybody, like, he had such a sense of achievement. And so when we had an assembly, I invited his mum to the assembly, and he got a certificate, and he was just so stoked with what he had achieved.
The intrinsic benefits. His principal says that's all very well, but teachers need to be able to pay the bills.
We have 2 beginning teachers that have come to teach at Birdwood School this year. Both of them are starting on $46,000.
Which is just under $900 a week before tax, or roughly $22 an hour. But Jenny Bernard is not only a teacher, she's a mum too, and last year she noticed her teenage daughter was being offered a higher hourly rate than she could offer her graduate teachers.
Now, this is crazy. My daughter, who works for a coffee shop, while she was still at secondary school, who was 17 years old, she was offered a senior position on her shift at the coffee place. I won't say the coffee place. And she was going to earn $25 an hour. Now, she doesn't have a degree. She's still at school. Isn't that crazy? And we are talking about the future of our country, our teachers teaching them. It's criminal. They need to earn more money.
And perhaps Jenny would say that. But if that sounds like advocacy for her staff during a pay round, enrolment numbers suggest something is required. The latest Ministry of Education figures show that between 2010 and 2016, the number of people enrolled in teacher training fell from over 14,000 to under 9,000 in 6 years.
Why would you want to come into teaching if you're not earning, we know that Auckland is expensive. How on 46,000 can a teacher pay rent, pay power, pay water? They can't.
Police officer. How did you know that was police officer? Because it has the letters O and F. Off. Good boy, good using your sounds.
James, the new entrance teacher, loves it. The intrinsic things writ large. His is a sense of vocation.
What was he shouting?
Fire, fire, fire.
Excellent, next page.
but the kids bounce like pinballs. Concentration spans are measured in seconds.
Oh, sorry. We're remembering our respect. One person speak at a time. Sorry.
And by the day's end...
Oh, I'm knackered. Yeah, I'm tired. Especially later in the term. As the term rolls on, you get more and more exhausted, I guess. But, very tired.
Is it a rewarding job?
Very rewarding, yes. It's just awesome when I see the children grow with what they're learning and get to where they need to be, as well as myself growing as a teacher as well. I'm learning heaps along with the children.
Which is what a vocation feels like. But landlords don't accept that cheque, and you can't save for a deposit on a home with it. And increasingly, the paradox of teaching is that a job that's so rewarding in vocational terms isn't financially rewarding enough to attract sufficient new applicants. What will it be? The money or the bag?
Knowing that I came in here and you were going to be asking me these kind of questions, and I feel like I'm just one teacher.
That's Sharon again, who, feeling the weight of responsibility, speaking on behalf of her entire profession, did this.
What I actually did was I got in touch with every Facebook friend teacher that I had, and I just said to them, if somebody asked you the question of how are things for you, what would you say?
A survey of sorts from teachers for you, listeners and viewers of RNZ.
Can I read them to you?
Absolutely. And off she went to get her phone, the modern world. And this is an edited sample of what the teachers who replied to Sharon want you to know.
So this first response was, "Hi Sharon, this sounds great. I love my job, I love teaching, and I love seeing the way the light goes on for some kids and their love of learning. Unfortunately, what I am currently battling is large numbers in the classroom, with at least a third of my children with complex learning needs, from sight to autism. I can have up to 3 children have a meltdown at one time, including this week running out of the gate because I asked him to sit with the rest of the class. I am one adult in a space with 30 children trying to keep learning happening for all." That's just a random person that is a teacher that I know, and that was her response. So the next one, "I often think about leaving the profession as it is hard supporting a wife and 3 children on a teacher's salary. That is one of the main reasons we left Auckland, moving away from family and friends. This took its toll on my health, marriage and personal relationships. To be honest, it is getting harder and harder. Hope this helps. I tried really to be honest."
And so the surveyed teachers, James the new teacher, Sharon the senior teacher who's gone about as far as she can go, and Jenny the principal. Let's end with her. Decades in the job and 3 points to make. 1, pay teachers more or run short of teachers. 2, give special needs students the support they need. And 3, value teacher aiding as real and meaningful work.
Because when it comes down to it, while many teachers say they're not here for the money, they still have bills to pay. I would also like to see teachers better resourced in terms of special needs, those kids that are coming into school with those complex needs, as well as maybe a better career pathway for them. I think we call our learning assistants, teacher aides, we call them pauwhina. Now, those guys, they come here and they do a really important job in our school. And some of those guys are only on $17 an hour. Now, would you do it? I am.
27 minutes, almost 26 minutes to 6 coming up. We'll go live to the Gold Coast where weightlifter Laurel Hubbard has injured her elbow in the 90 kilo plus class. She was leading the competition when she twisted her elbow, lifting 132 kgs. We'll try and get the latest on the extent of her injury. Fiji prepares for its second cyclone in less than a week, and video footage emerges of an attack on prison officers at an Auckland jail that led to a mass strip search in 2016. Would love your feedback. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell if you haven't already deleted your Facebook account, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Katrina Batten is beside me, waiting patiently to deliver the 5:30 headlines.
I am. The Immigration Minister says his department will work with the Human Rights Commission and the Privacy Commissioner to make sure information about overstayers is being used correctly. Ian Lees-Galloway has put on hold a controversial program that Immigration New Zealand used to target people who should be deported quickly because they could be costly to the health or justice systems. The data modelling program was criticised as racial profiling, but the minister says his officials insist they did not use race or nationality. The Waikato District Health Board has dispensed with its multi-million-dollar online doctor service Smart Health. The app allowed people to talk to a doctor on their smartphone, but only 10,000 people signed up. The 2-year trial cost the DHB at least $16 million. The Privacy Commissioner says Facebook users should delete their existing accounts if they want to be certain their data is not being misused. John Edwards says they could sign up to the social media platform again but use more robust privacy settings. Thousands of New Zealanders have been swept up in the Facebook data breach, which has affected 87 million people worldwide. The Northcote by-election will be held on Saturday, June the 9th. It follows the resignation of National MP Jonathan Coleman, who's held the seat since 2005. The former Health Minister is taking up a role as Chief Executive of the private hospital owner Acurity Health Group. A legal bid to block a major housing development in Wellington has failed. The High Court has rejected an application for a judicial review into the proposed Shelley Bay development. Several people are dead after an airstrike on an airfield near the Syrian city of Homs. Syrian state media is blaming the United States, but the Pentagon has categorically denied involvement. It follows a statement by the US President Donald Trump saying Syria would pay the price for a suspected chemical attack on the Syrian town of Douma. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you, which is not terribly far away, thanks to me dribbling on. Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Emile Donovan. Emile, a changing of the guard at My Food Bag.
Hi John, yeah that's right. So this is the company's chief executive Cecilia and James Robinson. They announced today they're going to be stepping down from their position as co-chief executives and rather up, some would say, into governance roles, directorship, so away from the day-to-day dealings of the company. Now, these two have been with My Food Bag since the very beginning, way back in 2012 when the company first started up. They co-founded it along with Nadia Lim, Nadia Lim's husband Carlos Bagri and Teresa Gattung, and they've overseen some pretty phenomenal growth, as kind of we all know really. My Food Bag, what a success story. They are leaving the company in pretty good shape, all things considered. It's bringing in annual revenues of over $100 million, and the company says it's delivering around 40 million meals every year. Now, as I mentioned earlier, those two will be staying with the company as directors. They'll just be taking a more sort of broad overview of the company rather than being involved in the day-to-day business. We had a chat with Cecilia Robinson earlier on today. She says while she can't predict the future, they do want to stay with the company. They're not going to be cutting and running anytime soon. And the company says it does have a succession plan in place, so it'll be appointing a new CEO pretty soon.
Thanks, Emile. Some bullish noises from the oil and gas industry here. One company in particular, right?
That's right, yeah. So New Zealand Oil and Gas, this is going to get a bit confusing, but New Zealand Oil and Gas has taken a 25% share in the Kohatukai onshore field near New Plymouth. Now, New Zealand Oil and Gas's majority shareholder, that's OG Oil and Gas, they have also taken a 25% stake in that field. Now, they reckon the field could turn into a commercial producer of methanol with the potential for exporting to the third or so people in the world who live in countries that aren't self-sufficient in terms of energy. Now, if you remember back a couple of weeks or so, the Prime Minister was talking about the possibility of ending oil and gas exploration. Those remarks have since been sort of downplayed or clarified at least. But the industry itself seems pretty unfazed. They are even saying they have a shed load of cash available and they will unapologetically look to pump that into any assets or exploration that they deem fit, really.
Thanks, Emile. What happened on the market today? I have no idea, actually. I haven't seen anything.
Well, the top 50 index was up by about 60 points. That's 0.72%. It closed on 8454. The dollar was steady, really. It was up marginally. It's buying 73 US cents, 94.9 Australian and 51.8 pence.
Thank you very much, Emile Donovan, joining us from our Wellington newsroom. Reports from Syria's state media say a military airfield near the city of Homs has come under missile attack and it's blaming the United States. However, the Pentagon has put out a statement categorically stating that it is not involved. The reports came after Donald Trump said Syria would pay a price for a suspected chemical attack on a rebel-held area outside Damascus yesterday. Medical sources say dozens of people were killed in the attack. Video footage shows several men, women and children lying lifeless inside a house, many with foam coming from their mouths. The BBC's Martin Patience has been in Damascus and has filed this report.
This was the scene at an emergency clinic in Douma. Medics hosing down children after an alleged chemical attack. Some children were barely conscious. The medics are doing what they can, but they're overwhelmed, working in a war zone without enough medical supplies.
We received many patients who suffered from symptoms compatible with exposure to chlorine gas, high concentration chlorine gas. Also, their symptoms were deteriorating in a fashion that's not compatible with pure chlorine gas exposure. And that's why our physicians are concerned about exposure to nerve gas in low concentration.
President Trump denounced the alleged chemical attack. On social media, he wrote, "President Putin, Russia and Iran are responsible for backing Animal Assad. Big price to pay."
Agreed and have agreed.
The White House is ruling nothing out.
So
is it possible there will be another missile attack?
I wouldn't take anything off the table. These are horrible photos. We're looking into the attack at this point. The State Department put out a statement last night, and the President's senior national security cabinet have been talking with him and with each other all throughout the evening and this morning.
Back in Syria, government troops have surrounded Douma. It's the last rebel-held town in eastern Ghouta. Both Damascus and its ally Russia describe claims of a chemical attack as fabrication. And they're prepared to take Douma at any cost.
That report from the BBC. Just breaking news out of the Gold Coast. It does look like Laurel Hubbard has injured her elbow so severely she's going to have to pull out of her event. She was leading it after one lift. But a pretty nasty. The weight kind of went over her head and the elbow was twisted horrifically. It looks like she's out. We are waiting for absolute confirmation on that. She's out. So that's heartbreaking news for Laurel Hubbard, leading after one lift, but now out of the event. We'll update that as soon as we can. Just back to Syria, the UN Security Council is to meet overnight in an emergency session to discuss the chemical attack. At the same time, it's been confirmed that the final phase of the surrender of Douma is now underway, with the first group of fighters and their families leaving the area. It represents a major victory for Syrian government forces in the 7-year-old conflict. People in Fiji are braced for another cyclone. Just a week after Cyclone Josie killed 6 people, 2 more people were killed at the weekend after a week's worth of heavy rain lashed the west and north, inundating towns and villages. This has been a rough season, and as RNZ Pacific Sally Round reports, Cyclone Kenny is due to hit tomorrow.
Fearful, frustrated and fed up. That's how many people are feeling ahead of Cyclone Kenny, due to be closest to Fiji around midday on Tuesday. But people are so engrossed coping with the floodwaters, the impending cyclone is just another worry to add to many. The local charity Friend has been helping get donated goods to the flood-struck, and its director Sashi Kiran says people are finding it tough.
They have seen the houses go, they have seen the whole cars go, they have seen, the entire furniture go into rivers. And then after that, they've had to live in very wet clothes and in muddy conditions for days.
Sashi Kiran is worried about people with chronic diseases who've lost all their medication in the floods, and her charity's planning medical clinics once the weather's abated. She says creeks that have never flooded before have burst their banks from Lambasa to Singatoka, and houses have been inundated under the deluge.
There was one family which was actually trapped in their own house, and they said the current was so strong, and thankfully for the walls, they were able to get on top of, say, beds and things, and they were pushed up towards the ceiling for like half an hour, but the whole place was covered with mud.
Ms Kiran says food, water and hygiene are set to be an even bigger problem this week in the wake of Cyclone Kenny. Fiji's all-important sugarcane crop is nearly ready for harvest, but Cyclone Kenny is forecast to bring more rain and wind to western Fiji, where most of the cane farms are located. Push Das, who represents cane growers in Raki Raki, says the crop's probably down by a third already, either uprooted or flattened after last week's bad weather. He says growers will be looking for subsidies or a special cane payment once the bad weather's over.
They can't do anything at the moment because of waterlogged farms and because the rain has hardly stopped since Easter weekend. Mentally, they are very disturbed, but like as it is, it's all natural. We can't do much about it.
Sulueti Wanga has been at the market in Lambasa stocking up before the cyclone. She says prices for some items have nearly doubled.
Before we usually buy pumpkin for $5 or $6 the whole pumpkin. Now it has increased to $10 the price. Because of the bad road, the farmers are unable to supply their produce to the market.
Anand Nagan runs a metal casting business in Mba. He says people in the area are feeling it badly, and he says the constant flooding's costing him money.
We just keep getting flooded out all the time. We're just fed up of it, absolutely fed up. And we're just fed up of this water coming in and out, and other people's material and junk coming down, when we have to spend our own money to clean it up.
Mr. Nagan had $200,000 worth of new gear sitting in a container on the riverbank.
I had a brand new furnace at the front of my place, and it's actually gone 500, nearly 300 metres down near the riverbank. And I just managed to get it out yesterday onto higher ground.
Mr. Nagan says the Bar River needs regular dredging and drains fixed up to deal with the increased flooding. For Checkpoint, Sally Round.
Video footage has emerged of an attack on prison officers at an Auckland jail that led to a mass strip search in 2016. RNZ has been given permission by the High Court in Auckland to show the CCTV video of the attack at Paremoremo. The strip search of 209 prisoners over 2 days was at the centre of a court case last month where two of the country's most notorious inmates, Arthur Taylor and Philip John Smith, argued it was unlawful. Laura Tupou reports.
On October 19, 2016, two corrections officers are filmed taking a mop and bucket to the grate of a section of C Block, a maximum security area at Paremoremo. When the grate is opened, 4 prisoners jump out with homemade weapons. The Vice President of the Corrections Association, Paul Dennehy, describes what happens next.
These prisoners had all strapped the weapons to their hands, their fists. So initially the staff thought that they were just being punched. In fact, they were being stabbed. And because the weapons were strapped to the prisoners' hands, it wasn't very easy for the staff to disarm them.
Within a minute, several prison officers arrive to help. One stumbles to the floor with stab wounds to the head. Within 2 minutes of the attack, 2 of the 4 inmates are separated, controlled and surrounded by officers. Over the next 2 days, the East Division goes into lockdown and 209 prisoners are strip-searched. Corrections told the court it was a premeditated gang-related attack by prisoners drunk on homebrew. It argued the strip search was justified because the gang had contacts across the prison and other inmates may also have had weapons or shanks made from prison-issued televisions. Paul Dennehy from the Corrections Association says staff backed corrections' order for cell and strip searches even though records of what was found were patchy.
The improvised weapons that prisoners use and used don't necessarily have to include any element of metal at all. They can be sharpened plastic. In this event, they were made using parts of the TV brackets that have been supplied. So there are times when we won't discover a weapon by using a metal detector or a scanner, and it will only be through searching, strip searching, cell searching, that we will uncover the weapons to hand.
But Arthur Taylor and Philip John Smith told the court there was no reason to strip search everyone. They said there was no proof either of them were concealing contraband and therefore legally there were no grounds for them to be strip searched. Justice Peters has reserved her judgment in the case. The Corrections Minister Calvin Davis won't comment on the case, but in a statement says he expects the department to manage risk but also respect prisoners' dignity. Meanwhile, RNZ understands not all the officers involved in the 2016 attack are back at work. Paul Dennehy says it's difficult for people to understand what prison staff go through every day, and he worries about the possibility of the judge finding in favour of the prisoners.
The strip searching and the cell searching were a vital part of making sure that everyone's safety was completely ensured. If the ruling goes against the department, that will just lead to a more dangerous environment because prisoners will feel able to carry weapons more frequently, and that will just heighten the risk to prisoners and staff.
Meanwhile, the Corrections Amendment Bill, which is at Select Committee stage, will allow for the use of imaging technology like body scanners to be used in prisons to reduce reliance on rub-down or strip searches. In its first reading in Parliament, Labour's Stuart Nash said the new technology will be effective and afford more dignity to prisoners.
This change will help keep prisoners free from drugs and weapons, making them safer places for staff, visitors and prisoners, and at the same time will make them more humane places.
Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei ko Laura Tupou aho.
The small Canadian town of Humboldt has found itself the focus of national grief as the community mourns 15 young hockey players killed in a weekend bus crash. Another 14 remain in hospital. The Broncos junior ice hockey team was the pride of the rural Saskatchewan town. This afternoon, a vigil was held at the hometown ice rink where they were due to play a big semi-final match. Both the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the local Premier Scott Moe attended. Earlier, churches were full for services to remember those killed. Karen Pauls from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation sent this report from Humboldt.
In times of tragedy and sorrow, people seek solace in their faith. That's what happened at churches in Humboldt this morning.
Oh, we always come on Sundays, so yeah, and this is very different morning, isn't it?
People came to mourn, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible.
We're just showing up to show support for everybody. Yeah, I think we kind of need this today, like everybody else. So.
Where Brody would hang out. He taught Sunday school or helped.
Staff at Westminster United Church had to get a different teacher for this Sunday school class today. The regular one, 18-year-old Brody Hintz, was killed in the bus accident.
Younger children in this community really looked up to Brody.
After an emotional service, Reverend Brenda Curtis sat in the quiet sanctuary with church member Willie Kozakowski.
You know, that's one of the things I missed this morning, you know, walking in there. Where's Brody? You know, because he had just a passion for sports and he loved the Broncos, there was no question. Family. Brody was family.
Mm-hmm.
At the heart of this community of Humboldt, the hockey arena. Today, people are coming by wearing jerseys of all descriptions, some laying flowers, cards, and stuffed animals at a makeshift memorial, some just coming to connect with others. David Eberle is the father of a former Broncos hockey player. His daughter was billeting Logan Boulay, a defenseman from Lethbridge.
Logan was over at our place for Easter supper, you know, and now he's not here.
Boulay was critically injured in the crash. He was kept on life support until matches for his organs could be found.
There's 6 people out there received an organ from Logan Boulay, and I think that's incredible.
For every face on the Broncos team roster, there's a story. A grieving family, grieving friends, grieving community. Mayor Rob Minch says he appreciates all the support he's getting from around the world.
You know, I get a text message from somebody that has just a number there and an area code from I don't even know where, and it just says, "We're with you, we're behind you. Here's a poem that I wrote. You know, here's a song, here's a message."
This is heartbreaking. People's hearts are broken. For all of these 15 and their families and the ones who are recovering, you know, like their lives are altered forever.
Back at Westminster United Church, Brenda Curtis says the doors are open for anyone who needs comfort.
We don't have to suffer alone. We need to come together to these places, pray together, sit together, cry together.
Brenda Curtis there, ending that report from Karen Pauls at CBC in Humboldt. Let's go back across the Tasman to the Commonwealth Games. Sophie Pascoe's gold medal at the Games over the weekend came as no surprise to anyone. She really is extraordinary, Sophie Pascoe. But just a day earlier, a teenage swimmer from Wellington swam an absolute blinder to win bronze in the men's 400-metre medley, New Zealand's first medal in the pool. At just 18, Lewis Clareburt gets no high performance funding and doesn't even have his coach with him on the Gold Coast. Reporter Kate Newton and video journalist Claire Easton-Farrelly caught up with the surprise medalist.
There we see Clareburt. It is Lewis Clareburt who's going to get a New Zealand medal here. A third placing, a bronze for Clareburt.
No one was more stunned than Clareburt himself.
I was so happy. The first thing I probably looked at was my time, and to see that I got a 4-second PB, that was probably the main thing. And then to see the number 3 next to your name is pretty surreal.
Before the final, it was Clareburt's older teammate, Bradley Ashby, who was picked as the medal prospect, qualifying for the final third fastest, while Clareburt only just squeaked in. But off the starting blocks, it was Clareburt's night.
I went out hard and I trusted myself mostly, and pretty much that paid off at the end of the race, where I had a little bit left in the freestyle, which allowed me to overtake a couple guys and claim that bronze.
And what a stunning swim from the young man.
It was Clareburt's first event of his first Commonwealth Games, with another race to swim the very next morning.
The hardest thing was getting to sleep that night, but I managed to get a good 6 hours and then wake up in the morning and do another event. It's definitely pretty hard to forget about the medal and just reset and start all over again.
Last year was a standout for Clareburt, who won 3 golds and 4 silver medals at the Commonwealth Youth Games in the Bahamas. All the more impressive because he's not even part of the high-performance program that provides funding and coaching for elite athletes.
If you're a carded athlete, you get supported from High Performance Sport New Zealand in terms of you get strength and conditioning, you get a nutritionist, you get to go into the athlete lounge and get some nice free food, and you get a few other things. And I got that taken off me because I didn't move to Auckland and I wasn't as fast as some of the older guys. But I think now that I've sort of stepped up and things have changed a little bit, I might be able to get myself back on that program.
He doesn't even have his coach, Gary Hollywood, with him on the Gold Coast, with Hollywood talking him through training from Wellington.
I have to Skype him just whenever I'm free, and he keeps his iPad next to his bed, and I think I just wake him up every so often.
But right now, Clareburt's feeling vindicated in his choice to stick with Hollywood and Wellywood.
To stay home, to have home advantage, I guess, not to go to Auckland or go overseas has definitely helped a lot. And I feel like I'm sort of, because I'm training at home, everything's working for me.
On the Gold Coast, call Kate Newton a ho.
When Lana Barber won silver in race walking yesterday, she was the second New Zealand woman to get a medal in the event. She was also the second woman in her family to compete at a Commonwealth Games. Her mother, Shirley, ran for New Zealand at the Christchurch Games in '74. Megan Wheeler spoke to Alana, her father David, and Shirley after the race.
I think this is the first big race that I've had that both my parents have been able to watch, mainly just because of the logistics of, you know, often I'm racing such a far away, so this is almost home.
And you picked up the New Zealand flag off your mum as you passed the line.
Yeah, perfect.
There was a big argument whether we should or we shouldn't, because it might have put her off balance.
She could get DQ'd in the
Yeah,
last 100
that's
metres,
right, yes,
so we
right.
didn't want anything bad to happen
Yeah,
in the last 100 metres.
But we did it in the end. She snatched it from us. Yeah.
So Shirley, you competed at the Commonwealth Games in 1974. How amazing is it to watch your daughter now do this?
Oh, so amazing. Unbelievable. And actually my father probably would have gone to the Empire Games for swimming, but if it wasn't for the Second World War. So
there's quite the family history. Did you know Alana was going to grow into this?
no, we weren't sure whether it was a runner or a rower, was it?
Yeah.
Or
stage.
Grow.
But you were never pushy either. Like you never pushed me into doing sport. It was just like, here, this is some photos of me running.
Yeah, that's right.
but no pressure. You don't have to do this if you don't want to.
No, but we do say don't come home if you don't win. We say that. Yes.
Just a bit of pressure.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. But.
And David, you haven't left New Zealand for was it 45 years?
Yeah, about 46 years. Yes.
So was it worth the trip?
Very much so. The whole 3 hours in the aeroplane, yes, I managed to survive.
So do you live here now or are you going back?
I wouldn't mind coming back for a holiday.
Excellent. There you go, you've changed everyone's life.
Wow.
So will you make it to Tokyo? That's the question.
We'll think about it. I'll think about it.
Tokyo, it's a long way.
Tokyo, it's a long way. That was, if you weren't watching, it was a lovely shot of the three of them standing together like a sandwich, really, with Alana in the middle. A very proud mum and dad. Staying with the Commonwealth Games, Laurel Hubbard is out of the weightlifting. She had a great first lift. She was off to a very strong start, leading the field, but then the weights went over her head and she twisted her elbow horrifically, and she is out. We'll have more on that after 6. By golly, I suspect every teacher in New Zealand may have emailed or texted in after our stories have gone to air. We're going to get in touch with some of you. Thank you for your feedback. But a lot of you are saying now that it is simply too tough and not financially rewarding enough. And if you had your time over again, you would not do it. A lot of feedback. We'll bring you some after 6. But what we're going to do is call some of you. Thank you.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister is moving to lower expectations of a big spending budget next month, saying the government has been left with infrastructure and services that have been significantly underfunded. The Finance Minister will unveil the Labour-led government's first budget on May the 17th. Jacinda Ardern says she's had to dampen down her own expectations when she saw the state that the previous government had left the health and education in.
I've always said that from the beginning we thought it would be bad. We didn't know it would be this bad. And the public is seeing just a snapshot of it now. The state of Middlemore Hospital, I think, is emblematic of what we're seeing across the board.
Jacinda Ardern. The Immigration Minister has put on hold a controversial data modelling program that was used to profile overstayers. Last week, RNZ News revealed the existence of the program, which has been running for the last 18 months. It was being used to target people who could be a cost to the health or the justice system and who should be deported quickly. Critics say it was racial profiling, but the Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, says his officials insist that neither race nor nationality were used. He says the department will work with both the Human Rights Commission and the Privacy Commissioner to check that information is being used in the right way. Mr. Lees-Galloway says officials will stop using a spreadsheet tool until they're satisfied there are no human rights and privacy breaches. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Labour will put up a strong fight in the Northcote by-election. Northcote's current MP, National's Jonathan Coleman, is resigning from Parliament to take up a role as Chief Executive of the private hospital owner Acurity Health Group. The by-election will be held on Saturday, June the 9th. National has held the seat since 2005, and when Ms Ardern was asked if Labour is resigned to National winning the by-election, she issued this response.
Absolutely not. When has anyone ever said yes to that kind of question? Absolutely not. We will be undertaking our candidate selection very soon. If my memory serves, it's the end of this week. Certainly we'll be putting up a strong fight in that seat.
Jacinda Ardern. The Waikato District Health Board has pulled the plug on its ill-fated multi-million-dollar online doctor service, Smart Health. The online and mobile app enabled people to talk to a doctor on their smartphone, but only 10,000 people signed up. The DHB's Chief of Staff, Neville Hablis, says the 2-year trial cost a minimum of $16 million.
It's my personal view that we procured a piece of technology without a clear idea of how we were going to use it and implement it, and that made it difficult to bring our clinical staff with us. And I think in an ideal world, we would be working out more clearly what it was we were trying to achieve.
Neville Hablis says a review of the trial and the cost should be ready by the end of next month. The United States has denied carrying out airstrikes in Syria. Syrian state media has reported that missiles have hit one of its air bases near the city of Homs, killing up to 12 military personnel. Our US correspondent Simon Marks reports.
It wasn't us. That's the word from the Pentagon after airstrikes targeted the T4 airbase used by the Syrian Air Force in previous chemical attacks. The airstrikes came hours after President Trump threatened reprisals for the latest alleged use of chemical weapons, this time in the city of Douma. He called Syrian President Bashar al-Assad an animal. It's possible the Israelis were responsible for the overnight attack. They've hit that particular Syrian airfield before.
Simon Marks in Washington.
Southland Art Society's chair says the indefinite closure of the Southland Museum and Art Gallery marks the death knell for arts and culture in Invercargill. The museum will close its doors indefinitely after it was found likely to be earthquake prone and a risk to staff. It follows the closure of Invercargill City Gallery, which was operated by the Society late last year due to a lack of money and volunteers. The Southland Art Society chair, Marion Miller, says the closure of the museum is appalling.
That museum has been on the upgrade list for at least 10 years, and people have mucked around forever. And all the tourists go there. It's an iconic building, it's a destination, and where the hell will visitors go now? What about our social history? It's disgraceful.
Marion Miller says she feels the council is thumbing its nose at arts and culture in the city. It's 6:05. Sport. Tragedy has struck New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard with an elbow injury, forcing her to withdraw from the 90-kilogram final of the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast. The medal favourite received a green light after lifting 120 kilos. Her second attempt to break her own Games record was at 127 kilos was unsuccessful, but it was her final snatch at 132 kilograms that caused problems. Her left elbow appeared to have dislocated, then reset itself during the lift, forcing her to drop the weight. She rushed off the stage, apparently in agony, signalling immediately for medical treatment. The severity of her injury is not yet known. The Silver Ferns will be looking to restore confidence tonight when they face world number 9 Scotland. After their first ever loss to Malawi with a score of 53-57, they'll need a convincing points win over the Scottish to strengthen their differential if qualifying for the semi-finals is left to overall results. Head coach Janine Southby has admitted her frustration but says rectifying the situation is simple.
Yeah, look, we've got to play a full 60 minutes, and that is the most frustrating thing for everybody. We are absolutely guilty of not putting out a full 60-minute performance.
Janine Southby. The Silver Ferns face Scotland at 10:30 tonight. The same time world champion shot putter Tom Walsh goes for gold in that final. The squash singles finals featuring New Zealand's Joelle King and Paul Cole are set to start at 8 o'clock and 9:30 tonight respectively. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, they say one swallow doesn't make a summer, but what on earth do we make of the summer we've just had? Dr. Sam Dean, NIWA's senior climate change scientist, looks back on where we've been and what it might tell us about where we're going. That's after the news at 7.
And on Lately at 10, we feature Lately Reads with NZ book lovers and an author reading. We'll have an eye not only on books, but music, people and politics, keeping you up to date with the world at the other end of the day. Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and a significant winter storm will bring heavy snow and damaging winds to some areas. Check the latest watches and warnings. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, isolated showers frequent tomorrow, some heavy with thunderstorms and damaging wind gusts. For the remainder of the North Island, a few showers turning to rain with heavy falls in the south tonight, spreading north tomorrow with possible thunderstorms and damaging wind gusts. Snow lowering to 700 metres tomorrow evening. For Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers turning to rain this evening with heavy falls and snow lowering to 400 metres overnight tonight, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon, then clearing Nelson and Buller later. Strong gusty southeasterlies. Westland to Fiordland, showers, snow lowering to 600 metres overnight tonight, clearing tomorrow, strong gusty southeasterlies. Southland and Otago, showers heavy at times with snow lowering to 500 metres from tonight, but 300 metres for a time tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, rain with heavy falls developing tomorrow morning. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten. Let's go across the Tasman now, live to the Commonwealth Games. There's been heartbreak this afternoon for New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard. Laurel was leading the over 90k snatch event when she twisted her elbow, attempting 132k. She was leading the field after a really seemed effortless first lift. She dropped the bar awkwardly behind her though in this lift, abandoning the lift and immediately calling for medical assistance. Her elbow did things that they're not meant to do. Our reporter Joe Porter on the Gold Coast joins us now via live view. Joe, lovely to have you with us. And boy, it's been all on for New Zealand in the past couple of days. Let's start with Laurel. What's the story? Is she out of medal contention? She's out.
Absolutely devastating for Laurel Hubbard. She's completely out. Injury has ruled her out of the Commonwealth Games. Like you said, she was leading after her first snatch, 120 kilograms on the board, 7 kilograms more than anyone else managed to lift. However, attempting to go for a heavier weight and break her own record and the Commonwealth Games record, she's dislocated her elbow, immediately calling for medical attention, and now she is out of the game. So absolute heartbreak for Laurel Hubbard, who was a genuine gold medal contender for New Zealand and was on track to win that gold. So devastating for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the Silver Ferns. 24 hours on, or even a bit longer, it still seems as surreal to say that they lost to Malawi in the circumstances they did as it felt when it happened.
Yeah, first ever loss to Malawi, completely unexpected, and of course the Silver Ferns will be very unhappy with that performance. It does not bode well for their medal chances here. They do have, I guess, another game tonight, so not too much time to think about it, and they get to quickly move on against Scotland, which they're expected to win that game as well. But yeah, John, the Silver Ferns, I'm afraid they're not looking very good, and if they don't medal here, I think they might be one of the biggest disappointments for New Zealand at this Commonwealth Games.
The other extreme, Tom Walsh. What, do you have one shot? Did he just have one, or did I miss something? He wandered out, looked like he was throwing a minty or something, and that was it. He is just in fine nick, isn't he?
Oh, I mean, he's a monstrously heavy favourite to win gold, yeah, and he knows it himself. He's paying $1.10 at the bookies. He's told me to put the house on it, 10% return. It's a great investment. So it's a great investment. Look, he basically just has to show up to win. He's throwing 2 metres more than any of the other competitors here at the Gold Coast. So it's all about his own. It's all about his own performance. No, he is that much of a favourite. You simply can't jinx him. He will come out, and all he is trying to do is go through his own processes and perhaps break that Commonwealth Games record again, because he is simply unbeatable.
Yep, I'm touching all sorts of... we've got our wooden table being put to good use, Joe Porter. Let's talk about the Kiwis at the Velodrome. Gosh, they had a good weekend, didn't they? Good few days.
Oh, superb. I mean, the track has been a wonderful place for New Zealand, winning their first medals there. Of course, 3 on the first night, a swag over the weekend. More last night on the final night of racing, a silver for young Campbell Stewart. And the men's the points race rather, a fantastic result for him. And Natasha Hansen, another bronze for her to go with her 2 silvers. And of course, Eddie Dawkins, the 1,000 metre men's time trial, a silver medal, breaking the Commonwealth Games record. He hasn't done a time trial since 2013. He barely even traded for this, and he only took this race on a bet with the Australian track cycling coach.
I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't know the toll that this week would have had on my body, and it was pretty tough, and I got off to a little bit of a slower start than I wanted to, but I clawed a little bit of it back, but still good to dip under the minute.
Not bad for a race you took on a bet.
Yeah, always got to pay up on your bets, mate. So yeah, I never take anything like that lightly as well. I'm not going to come out here and ride around in an average time. I want to put everything into it, and apart from that, I didn't really do any training for it. I just did a bit of time on the air bars just so I wouldn't be too wobbly, and then just came out there and just gave it the beans, eh?
Who put you up to that bet?
His name's Nick Flyger. He's the head of Cycling Australia's track cycling program, and I went up to him after, and he's like, yeah, I didn't think you were going to do it. But
were you expecting to get silver in the time trial after 3 days of racing, and it's something you haven't done since, 2013?
Yeah, I was hoping to sneak away with the gold if I'd got a bit of time, but I knew as soon as it went up, I was like, I know that Glazer's going to put in a special effort, and it's going to be an absolute ripper. And in that regard, it's okay to get second if the guy that beats you rides a world record.
For someone that only dabbles, to come out and be one of only, 4 men to go under a minute at sea level in the time trial, bloody impressive, mate.
Yeah, it's when it got pulled from the Olympic program, we sort of scrapped it all together, and we only really did it if it was on like an okay day, like it was at the end of like a world's program or whatever. We had a couple of guys that went full gas for it, but for whatever reason it didn't work out. But yeah, Matthew Glazer's sort of been, he opened everyone's eyes to the way of riding it, and I'm sure there'll be many more sub minutes in the next sort of couple of years, and then we'll start dabbling, getting even lower and lower.
Now you got this medal, tempted to carry on with the time trial and give it a nudge at bigger events as well?
I don't know. I think maybe the coach is pretty excited about it, and when he gets sort of like something in his head, he just can't stop. So you probably see me on a set of air bars in the next sort of year, I think.
And when you crossed the line and saw that time, 59.9, what did you think?
I was pretty pumped, eh? I was like rolling around in the last lap, and I'm like, man, my cadence is low. I'm creeping along, and I thought maybe I'd come up and see like a 102 or something, I'd be devastated. But no, it was good. It was awesome, man. Crossing that line, looking up at the thing, I was like, oh yeah, that's mean. You know, all the hard work during that race had paid off, and yeah, it was awesome.
Oh yeah, that's mean. That's Eddie Dawkins talking to Joe Porter. Joe was joining us live from Broadbeach just before we heard from Eddie. We're going to go back and take that shot, the live shot. Joe has stepped out, and Claire Easton Farrelly is just showing us the beach, our camerawoman who's over at the Games. And I don't know, what's that? Is there 20, 25 people on the beach? It is autumn and it is evening, but Broadbeach ain't buzzing, and this is really interesting because the organisers of the Commonwealth Games are pleading for people to go to the Gold Coast for the final week of the competition. Businesses are complaining about a lower than normal turnover, and they're blaming the Games for actually scaring tourists away. And even locals are staying at home. Some businesses have shut, others say they've had to send staff home because the promised boost in business during the Games just hasn't happened. Lots of athletes, fewer Games tourists. With the details, here's the ABC's George Roberts.
Nobby's Ark is one of the busiest bars on the Gold Coast for Sunday drinks. But last night the cover band was entertaining a half-full room. The manager is Lewis Harisa.
Yeah, right now it's just like not even 50% capacity. Like usually at this time of night we just full, like at least all the tables inside, outside, just busy.
He says the Games are to blame.
I think it was a bit wrong. A lot of the changes they did on like closing streets, closing lanes for people was bad. And I hear a lot of business because they couldn't have access to the places, they have to close.
Down the road, Romana's restaurant staff are organising cutlery with few customers to serve. Rob Rossi is the owner.
It is very tough, especially for local businesses. We were prepared for a very busy period and it didn't happen.
Romana's is usually packed. It's been an institution on the Gold Coast for 35 years, with Mr Rossi's family at the helm. But even they were caught out by the lull in business over Easter and the usually busy school holiday period.
I think what has happened is kind of like a double whammy for local businesses in that the committee of the Commonwealth Games hyped it up so much. The locals went away, and also the tourists, the normal tourists who would frequent the Gold Coast during Easter, we had lost them as well.
The Commonwealth Games Organising Committee, though, is enjoying success. The chairman is Peter Beattie.
We're doing incredibly well. There's less than 90,000 tickets remaining. We have sold 1,133,700. It's well past our target.
Despite the reports of people waiting for hours for shuttle buses and that some trains weren't built for people with disabilities, he's claiming victory there too.
The latest figures I have from government is that 61,679 people used heavy rail between the Gold Coast and Brisbane yesterday, which is an extraordinary outcome for us.
There'd been a campaign to encourage people not to drive to the Games, but now with local businesses complaining of seeing little benefit from the thousands pouring in by train, Peter Beattie's urging people to get in the car.
What we need to do is say there is capacity even on the road. Now, I'll get into trouble for saying that, but you can get here, you can get parks, get into the local restaurants, go to the local bars.
And he's pleading with those who've left town to come back.
So if you're in Brisbane and you're worried, come down. There's plenty of space. If you're left because you were worried about it, you made a mistake, come back.
The chairman of the Commonwealth Games, Peter Beattie, ending that report from George Roberts. Just before we move on, a delightful text has come in. Kia ora, John. What about the beautiful Miss Holly Robinson? She's throwing the javelin tonight at 9:05. We will all be cheering her on from Okarito and Bannockburn. Go, Holly, says Ed. The Okarito sandfly repellent, I think, is Ed's nickname. I think Holly must be pretty fancy, doesn't it? I've got a mind like a sieve these days, Ed, but I think she did well at the Paralympics in Rio, didn't she? And yeah, so go Holly, chucking the javelin or throwing the javelin at 9:05 tonight. Lovely feedback coming in, lots from teachers, and we will be in touch with some of you. Thank you. The Southland Museum and Art Gallery will close its doors to the public indefinitely on Thursday after its buildings were deemed to be potentially earthquake prone and a risk to staff. The Trust Board of the museum, which employs 41 staff, was recently told the buildings may be unsafe after a peer review of a 2013 seismic assessment. However, Invercargill City Council Chief Executive Claire Hadley says she's confident the council took reasonable steps back in 2013, given the context of legislation at the time and the planned redevelopment of the facility. That redevelopment is up in the air after the Community Trust of Southland decided not to commit $5 million towards it. However, Mrs Hadley told Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown the council is committed to an arts and culture presence in Invercargill.
The Art Gallery Trust Board has resolved that the museum should close by the end of this week, and we are looking at what alternatives we can make for the provision of services and for the retention of staff. This council is committed to a future existence of a Southland museum in whatever form may eventuate from discussions.
So does that mean that seismic strengthening of the existing facilities is a possibility?
Absolutely. It means that all things will be considered. We need to look and see what the community values and what is valuable to the city.
However, that assurance is cold comfort to Southland Arts Society Chair Marion Miller. The Society's City Gallery in Invercargill had to close late last year due to a lack of money and volunteers. Marion Miller says the indefinite closure of the Southland Museum and Art Gallery marks the death knell of arts and culture in Invercargill, population about 55,000. She says the council has sat on its hands for too long when it came to redevelopment of the facility, and today's move is, and I quote, appalling.
That museum has been on the upgrade list for at least 10 years, and people have mucked around forever, and all the tourists go there. It's an iconic building, it's a destination, and where the hell will visitors go now? What about our social history? What about all the things that go on in the museum? It's disgraceful.
Mrs Miller says arts and culture is a big draw for Invercargill, and today's announcement will impact tourism in the city and wider region. The Invercargill City Council says decisions on the next steps for the building and the staff will be made in coming weeks. We're also trying to find out what happens to the tuatara that are there, about 100 of them, including Henry, who I think is 110 years old. Population of Invercargill about 55,000 from memory, roughly 220,000 guests through there. So on a per capita basis, that is a pretty impressive visitation rate. Feedback coming in on a lot of things tonight. Teachers, we're going to deal with you over the next couple of days, but the Privacy Commission, says Peter, suggests I delete my Facebook account if I don't want my data accessed. But deleting my account only deletes my access. My 10 years of data is still at Facebook and still available to Facebook and any successful hackers. We are told there are ways you can delete it, Peter, but I don't know what they are. We'll try and get some advice around that. And also, I keep saying data, but Radio New Zealand's correct pronunciation, I'm told, is data. Data, you say data, I say data. Australia's live export industry is under pressure after revelations that 2,500 sheep died on board a ship out of Fremantle headed for the Middle East last year. The animals died of extreme heat and humidity, and what's been described as a horrific video of their condition has been widely circulated. Today, Australian Maritime and Agricultural Authorities have blocked the same vessel with 65,000 sheep on board from leaving West Australia until the operator improves conditions. Yes, 65,000 sheep. Here's the ABC's Angus Randall.
Sheep dead or close to dying, others panting as they're pushed from side to side with the waves on their way to the Middle East. The images, first broadcast on Channel 9's 60 Minutes, have shocked the nation. Simon Westerway is the CEO of the Australian Livestock Exporters Council.
They're really poor, appalling images. We've, as an industry body which oversees our sector, have not walked away from this at all in recent times. New evidence has been provided. The images are poor. We believe there's a number of standards that haven't been met.
In response, the Department of Agriculture has imposed a series of special conditions. Before the Awassi Express can set sail, it'll need to guarantee improved access to feed, water and ventilation. And shipping company Emmanuel Exports needs to prove there's a sufficient number of vets on board. Simon Westerway believes the stricter conditions are standard after a voyage with a high death rate.
It's not indifferent that where there is an exporter that's had to do a reportable incident in their following shipment or shipments, that they will need to meet some new standards. Now, there's some very strong and tough standards that Emmanuel Exports will need to meet with respect to their next journey to the Middle East. And look, we welcome the regulator acting in the way that they feel they need to act.
And later today, Simon Westerway will meet with the department to lay out fresh industry standards.
A number of areas that we think is part of a plan that can even further advance animal health and welfare arrangements. That includes investigating the reduction of stocking densities for sheep to the Arabian Gulf during these high peak summer weather events. It includes more effective monitoring and recording of onboard conditions. And we believe there's the opportunity for additional independent on-board personnel.
He calls the incident last August, where 2,400 sheep died, an aberration.
Last evening's presentation of the footage appeared very much to concentrate on a particular voyage which has been reported on, which has clearly been a very poor outcome from an animal health and welfare point of view, in which, we understand the regulator may have further line of inquiries into that.
However, Dr. Bidder Jones from the RSPCA believes most vessels are overcrowded.
What is very concerning about what the footage that has come out reveals is that the true conditions on board, and these were conditions that were signed off by the Australian government as being compliant with Australian standards, those true conditions cause inevitable suffering for every animal that is exported.
The chief scientist is calling for an end to live exports.
This industry is a stain on the reputation of those farmers, and I am sure that any farmer who saw the footage, who's looking at the footage right now, would be shocked and appalled to think that their sheep might be put through this kind of journey.
RSPCA spokesperson Dr. Bidder Jones ending that report from the ABC's Angus Randall. Now, the same ship had earlier been used for the New Zealand live export trade. More than 5,000 dairy cows were exported on it from Napier early last year, but there were no complaints then. The Ministry for Primary Industry says any vessel with a high mortality rate for livestock will be investigated further, and mistreatment of animals on ships is unacceptable. It's 25 minutes past 6. Officials in Papua New Guinea's Hela province say a powerful 6.3 magnitude aftershock which hit the highlands in the weekend has caused more damage, extensive damage. They say the shallow tremor felt as bad as the major quake which devastated parts of the region 6 weeks ago now. It comes as ongoing violence in the quake disaster zone forces the evacuation of relief and medical staff. With more on this, here's the ABC's PNG correspondent Eric Torchik.
People in the earthquake zone have become used to aftershocks, but the Deputy Administrator of Hela Province in the Highlands, Pius Pape, says this tremor felt like the disaster was happening again.
I was on the ground and, I was shaken up and it was as bad as the last earthquake.
Many people living near the epicentre of February's devastating earthquake have fled to larger villages on ridges in the hope of avoiding being buried in landslides. But PNG's emergency controller, Bill Hamblin, says the new quake could have caused serious damage in those places.
Some of those remote areas could easily be fatalities in those areas as a result of that earthquake, because some of the ridges may have slipped away further. There are some villages precariously placed on the top of these ridges where the landslides had occurred, and certainly they could have gone over the edge with another earthquake there.
Authorities haven't been able to contact people in those villages since the new tremor, and will have to wait until teams can be sent there by helicopter. Dr. Hamblin says if the latest quake caused more landslides, they'll exacerbate the problem of water pollution that's now affecting hundreds of thousands of people. The waterways from the quake zone flow into the Fly River, one of Papua New Guinea's largest and most important river systems.
We flew over that the other day, and it's full of mud. It's like a mud pie. It's just so thick. This will just increase that still and continue it. As a result of that, there's no oxygen in the river, and all the fish, crocodiles, turtles, etc. are dying in that river.
Another huge problem confronting PNG authorities is increasing violence and lawlessness in the earthquake zone. At least 12 people have been killed in tribal fighting in the town of Tari in the past week, and health workers have been evacuated from the provincial hospital where survivors of the violence were being treated. The hospital is now being guarded by soldiers, and a Defence Force medical team is going in this week to keep it running. The violence is also affecting other relief efforts. The United Nations resident coordinator in PNG, Gianluca Rampolla, says a UN worker was injured when an aid convoy was attacked in the Southern Highlands on Saturday.
They got blocked on the streets by a mob, and their convoy that was escorted by both police and the PNG Defence Force was attacked with stones and machetes.
Mr. Rampolla says most aid workers have been forced to leave areas closest to the quake epicentre because of the violence. He says the latest quake is a further complication for relief agencies who are already struggling with many problems in the disaster zone.
The trauma is still big, and this is making things only worse. It might have an impact on continued displacement, while we were hoping that we will be able to start bringing communities back to their villages. And again, this is compounded by the security situation that doesn't allow us to actually operate.
That was the UN's Gianluca Rampola ending Eric Torchik's report from PNG. I'm just going to read this out and I'm just going to savour it. In fact, I may just sit back and have a drink as I say these words. No why in data, John. Your original rendering was correct. Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves because what I'm about to say out loud is blasphemy. The RNZ style guide is wrong. No one has ever said those words on national radio before, as it is on a number of matters. Signed a Doctor of Science. I don't know whether that's your name, Doctor of Science, or whether you are a Doctor of Science, but whoever you are, thank you for that magnificent text. The RNZ Style Guide is wrong. It is data, not data. RNZ Style Guide, people, if you're listening, data. Lots of people saying live animal exports are an obscenity and should be stopped immediately. Boy, those texts started coming in fast. That's an issue people feel very strongly about. Pip's just whispered something in my ear, but the music's coming in as well, and I'm just... Oh, top text is good. I question the validity of the earthquake risk assessment of the Dunedin Art Gallery and Museum. I think it will prove to be an overzealous estimation based on fear and not actual risk or the condition of the buildings. Well, based on insurance cost overhyped by those assessors so the insurance industry can gouge, as they always do, pay dividends and not keep capital aside for real assessments. Thank you, Ian, and thank you for being with us tonight.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister warns there won't be a big spend in next month's budget due to major underfunding of infrastructure and services by the previous government. The Immigration Minister says officials will stop using a spreadsheet tool to profile overstayers until they're sure there are no human rights and privacy breaches. Labour's leader says the party will put up a strong fight in the Northcote by-election on June the 9th to replace retiring National MP Jonathan Coleman. The Waikato District Health Board has cancelled its undersubscribed online doctor service after a 2-year trial that costed at least $16 million. And the closure of the Southland Museum and Art Gallery has been described as the death knell for arts and culture in Invercargill. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Eastern Ghouta cannot wait.
It's no secret that Xi Jinping has